Just after midnight, Cheryl turned the glass jar over on the kitchen table and let it all fall out at once. The crumpled ones, the roll of quarters, the pennies she used to be ashamed of. She smoothed each bill flat against the oilcloth with the side of her hand, the way she smoothed a bedspread at work, and she started to stack. Halfway through, her hands got to shaking so bad she had to stop and press them flat on the table. She was afraid of the number. Not that it was too small. She was afraid, for the first time in 55 years, that it might actually be enough. To understand why a hotel maid from Chatham was sitting at her own table at midnight, scared to count her own money, we have to go back 10 months to a Tuesday in the church kitchen. If your paycheck is already gone before the ink dries, and you've decided that's just how it is for people like you, stay with me. This one's going to sound like your own life. Cheryl Dawson was 55, and she cleaned rooms at a big hotel down in the Loop. Up before the sun, red line from 79th, uniform on and cart stocked by 7. 16 rooms on a good day, more when somebody called off. She'd made 10,000 beds for people she'd never meet, folded the end of the toilet paper into a neat point, and left the room looking like nobody had ever suffered in it. $17 an hour, part of it in tips somebody remembered to leave, most of it in tips they didn't. After 30 years of work, Cheryl had never once had $1,000 with her name on it. Not once. It wasn't foolishness. She didn't drink, didn't play the numbers, hadn't bought herself a real coat since the last one gave out. It was just the shape of the money. It came in tired and left in a hurry. The light bill, the CTA card, her mother's copay, a plate at the repast, shoes for the grandbaby whose mama was doing her best. By the time Cheryl caught her breath, the check was a rumor. Her mother used to say it flat, wiping her hands on her apron. "Baby, folks like us don't save. We survive, and there's no shame in it." Cheryl grew up on that sentence, and because she believed it was just the truth, in 30 years, she never once tried to keep a single dollar back from the flood. On top of her dresser, behind the church fans and a dried-out corsage, sat a glass jar with a screw lid. She'd bought it at a 5 and dime on 63rd when she was 17. Too clear and pretty to shove pennies in, she'd thought back then, so she'd keep it for something nice. 38 years later, it still held nothing but a little dust and one dead ladybug. Kept safe, empty, like it was already full of something. If this is your first time here, know that this channel was made for women exactly like Cheryl, women like you. Go on and subscribe, stay close. These stories belong to us. That particular month, it all came due at once. The dentist wanted $300 for her mother's bridge and said the number without blinking, like it wasn't somebody's whole week standing there. 2 rooms got cut from her schedule the same week the hotel was slow. Cheryl sat at this same table with the bills spread out like a hand of cards nobody could win, and she did the arithmetic twice. Both times, it came back the same. There was no version of the month where she came out ahead. There never had been. She was 55 years old, one dentist bill from zero, and every penny she ever touched had already belonged to somebody else before she got it. She'd find those somebody else pennies on the floor of the room she cleaned, under the bed, behind the nightstand, and she'd drop them in the ashtray on her cart and think, pennies aren't money, What's a penny ever done for anybody? What Cheryl didn't know was that a Tuesday in the church kitchen was about to answer that exact question. She was up to her elbows in a sink of greens, getting ready for the Women's Day dinner, when Miss Oilia settled onto her stool by the steam table to shell peas. Miss Oilia was 79, had cooked for that church since before Cheryl was born, and had a way of saying enormous things while looking at a bowl of peas. Cheryl, half laughing to keep from crying, said money moved through her hands like sand through a screen. Always had. That saving was for people with something left over, and she'd never had anything left over. Miss Oilia didn't look up. Skim the first penny off every dollar, baby, before it's even warm. The dollar never feels it, but you will. Then she asked Cheryl to pass the salt. She had no idea she'd just set something down in the middle of that kitchen that Cheryl would carry home like a stone in her shoe. 60 years cooking for other people's celebrations, Miss Oilia added almost to herself. And the women who ended up all right weren't the ones who made the most. They were the ones who paid themselves the tiniest bit first, before the world lined up with its handout. She cracked another pod. Cheryl kept washing greens and pretended it hadn't landed anywhere. On the train home, Cheryl held her tote on her lap and watched the south side slide past the dark window, her temple against the cold glass. In her apartment, she reached up on the dresser for a clean scarf, and her hand stopped on its own on the empty jar. She turned it a quarter turn so the label faced the wall. Didn't take it down, didn't put anything in it, just turned it and stood there a minute in the yellow light with the dust of 38 years inside it. That Friday, Cheryl did exactly what 30 years had trained her to do without deciding a thing. Cashed the check, filled the cart, covered the copay, put a 20 in the card for her grandbaby, and told herself the same thing she always told herself, that whatever was left on Monday would be the start of her savings. Miss Oilia's voice drifted somewhere far off, like a song coming from a passing car. Monday came. What was left was $2.11. She dropped it in the junk drawer and called it a start, same as always. The jar was on the kitchen windowsill one morning, not the dresser. Cheryl stood there in her robe with her coffee going cold and could not remember carrying it in there. She turned it back around too. The label was facing her now. The first crack came at work, of all places. She was riding the service elevator with Lorna, who'd cleaned rooms longer than Cheryl, 62 and steady, and she saw Lorna slide a folded 5 off her own tip and tuck it into a little zip pouch before she'd even counted the rest. Every single room, Lorna said. First thing, before it can go anywhere. Cheryl knew by heart the road her own money traveled every week, every stop, every hand. And standing in that elevator, it hit her that in 30 years, she had never once been the first stop on her own road. Not once had she skimmed a thing off the top for the woman doing the work. That thought clung to her like a smell that won't wash out. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She tried harder, skipped her own lunch twice, walked past the coffee cart, white-knuckled a whole week, and by Friday, she'd put $19 in the glass jar and felt ashamed she could say right out loud. $19. Less than she'd tip a stranger for carrying her bags. She was leaving herself a tip after waiting on her own life hand and foot for 30 years. Then the slow week hit, the short check, and her hand went into that junk drawer all by itself. Easy, practiced, like it had made that trip 1,000 times. This time, she watched it happen, the bills already in her fist, and she couldn't look at the jar on the sill. That Sunday made it worse before it made it better. Her daughter came by after service with the baby, tired around the eyes, and while the little one banged a spoon on the floor, she set 2 20s on the table, quiet, not looking up. For Grandma's tooth thing, Ma, don't argue. Her girl, raising a child on a home health aide's pay, sliding money across the table to the mother who'd worked since before she was born. Cheryl looked at those 2 20s and saw her own mother's whole life in them, and her own, and that baby on the floor coming up right behind, the same wheel turning one more time. That is when it hurt all the way to the bottom. $1 isn't yours just because you earned it. It belongs to whoever gets to it first. And for 30 years, the one person who never got to Cheryl's dollar first was Cheryl. She sat down on the kitchen floor that night with her back against the cabinet, the way you do when the chair is too far away, and she took the jar down and held it in her lap in the dark. Miss Ophelia's voice came back whole this time, clear as a bell struck once. Skim the first penny off every dollar, baby, before it's even warm. Cheryl thought about all those pennies on the floors of all those rooms, the ones she'd sworn weren't money. She'd been right about one thing and wrong about everything. A penny alone isn't money, but the first penny, taken before the flood, kept where the flood can't reach. That penny was the only money she'd ever actually get to keep. Her check came every week. The world came every week too, right behind it, hungry with its hand out. For 30 years, she'd set the table for everybody else and eaten what they left. There's a kind of saving nobody ever claps for. A woman tucking away what the whole world swears she can't spare. Quiet, where nobody's looking, nobody seeing it, nobody seeing her. Until one day, it's finally too much to spare, and too big not to see. So the next payday, before her own hands could touch the rest, Cheryl took 1 penny off every dollar of that check and put it in the jar. Then she put the whole first hour of the day's tips in behind it. 1%. It sounded like nothing. It felt like nothing. That was the point, Miss Ophelia would have said. The dollar never even feels it. And here's the strange part. Nothing fell apart. The light stayed on. The world ate 1 plate less and didn't even notice. She did the same thing the next week and the week after. And somewhere in there, the rest of the money started behaving. The late fees quit showing up. The impulse dollars at the register lost their pull, because a woman who pays herself first starts guarding what's hers. She took the extra rooms nobody wanted, and where that overtime used to melt into the weekend, it went straight into the jar now, whole, before it was warm. That was the rule, and it fit in one breath. The first penny is yours. Take it before the world wakes up. 10 months later, she stripped a whole floor by herself on a short-staffed Sunday, came home, and turned the jar over on the table because it wouldn't hold another dollar. That's where the counting started and where her hands started shaking. When she finally made herself stack the last of it, the number sat there on the oilcloth and would not move. $1,020. Hers, not left over, not survived, kept on purpose first. She pressed both hands flat on the table and let herself do the thing she'd promised she wouldn't do over money. She cried. Then she wiped her face on her sleeve and laughed, because it was almost funny. 38 years that jar sat empty, waiting to find out what it was for. And the story could end right there. It doesn't. A month on, there was a new girl on the rooms, Trina, barely 23. And one afternoon in the linen closet, Cheryl heard her say it, flat, folding a stack of pillowcases. "No point saving on what they pay us. A few dollars never did nothing for nobody." Cheryl went still. It was her own voice coming out of a 23-year-old, word for word. The same thing her mother used to say, wiping her hands on that apron. The same thing Cheryl had told herself for 30 years, dropping pennies in the ashtray on her cart. So she didn't argue, and she didn't preach. She reached in her pocket, found a penny, pressed it into the girl's palm, and closed her fingers over it. "That one right there is the only kind that stays," she said. "One off every dollar, before anybody else can touch it. Not because it's a lot, because it's first." The next week, she brought Trina a glass jar with a screw lid and dropped the first penny in herself, so the girl would hear the small sound it makes going in. Cheryl's own jar rode to work in her tote now. Not dust and a dead bug anymore, but heavy. The way a thing gets heavy when it's finally doing what it was made to do. It was never meant to sit pretty and empty. It was made to hold first things. Skim the first penny off every dollar, baby, before it's even warm. The dollar never feels it, but you will. If this story touched something in you, write it in the comments, all caps, just like this. First penny, mine. I read every single one of them. And send it to a friend who works too hard to have this little. She'll understand it before it's even over. And if you made it this far, this channel is yours too. Subscribe and tap the bell. Every single week there's another story about a woman who turned it around the slow, quiet, real way. The way that lasts. If you want to take that first step today, there's a free app that'll help you put order to all of this, the same way that jar did for Cheryl. The link is down in the comments. Take care of yourself, friend. And remember, the world will always be hungry and always be first in line unless you get there before it. Take your penny off the top, and if this one spoke to you, stay a little while longer. Right next door, there's another story about a woman who did everything by the book, budgeted every dollar, wasted nothing, and still came up empty every single month until she finally saw the trap that was hiding in plain sight. It's worth your time.